So good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. Time is now 9:06 a.m. This is a special meeting of our elected officials. Actually, not so special because we do this on a monthly basis. In any case, officially calling this meeting to order. Attending Commissioners Duncan and Filios. Commissioner Brooks is excused. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we have several business items. Let's go on to the first one. Consideration of replacement for the Idaho Association of Counties Board action. Barry, please.
Kootenai County has a representative on the Idaho Association of Counties Board based on our population only. It's not, North Idaho, or the district has one as well that is selected, but Kootenai County gets their own. When that came about, I volunteered to do that. With the startup of jury trials within the last 6 weeks or so, the amount of work that has come to bear on my office has caused for me to be much more present in court to help out with the attorneys who are basically working through a year backlog of trials that have been on hold during COVID. So at this point, what I'm proposing is that I would like to finish out the legislative session for sure, because that involves quite a bit of activity, both in meetings and in consideration of issues and that kind of thing. But after that, I wanted to throw open the opportunity for anybody that might be interested in serving in that capacity to step up. It's pretty fun, generally. Sometimes it's a bit of work during the legislature, just kind of keeping track of bills and that kind of thing. But it's a good opportunity to meet other elected officials and work on statewide issues that come up both during the legislature and in between when people are working on things that are of mutual interest. So that is what's on the table.
So Barry, when would you finish? Are you thinking the end?
Ideally, it would be at the end of the legislature, which I've been told is going to last for another 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So maybe in a month, maybe at the next meeting.
Okay, all right.
We could make it official, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Who's interested? Wow. Why don't we rush for the exits?
I would be interested, but timing is not good for me.
That's the problem for a county like ours, fortunately.
Barry, what's the remaining term of your appointment?
I think it's indefinite. I don't think there is a term because Kootenai County has an indefinite position. It just keeps on going. And I don't know that when I volunteered and was selected that it was for a particular time frame. I don't know if anybody else remembers, but I don't think there is. I think it's just you volunteer and you're selected and you go.
No one interested? Wow.
Well, I can do it. I'm the alternate right now, and maybe if Bela wants to be the alternate, and then as things progress and things smooth out in your neck of the woods, then we can talk about flip-flopping back.
Because you're also chairing District 1.
Yeah, that's quarterly meetings. That's not going to take any time.
You okay with that?
So what timing are we talking about?
Probably starting in May.
Yeah, about a month.
But as an alternate, I did nothing unless Barry was out of town.
I could serve as the alternate, Bela, if pushing it back for some period of time would work better for you.
How often do you guys meet? How often are you down there, Barry?
Well, normally, let's put it that
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
probably at least 2 to 3 times a year. So the IAC, annual meeting, and
Right.
we'll have a board meeting at least once, and then, occasionally, they might ask for you to come. We come down during the legislature.
Okay.
It's that kind of thing. Most of it is conducted over the phone right now by Zoom.
You okay?
I appreciate the consideration. I frankly strongly feel that it's too soon for me.
Okay, all
I'd
right.
say I probably would, I've got a number of issues I've got to work on in my department, and they need my attention. I would say I probably would need a year.
Steve?
Can you tell us, has it been worthwhile representing Kootenai County on the board? Can you give us kind of a flavor of the importance of this position and what impact you think you've had?
So I think it's important because our county is, we're obviously not Ada County, we're not that big, and so, and then there's some counties that are really small in terms of population, and so the issues that come up that get decided can be, diverse, but also, like, give you an example, I'm on the committee that's talking about, dues on an annual basis for the county. And so you've got a great disparity in terms of kind of funding that's available to the different counties. And so we're working through a formula right now. And I think if you're not represented in those kinds of decisions, down the road, it can really end up impacting, your county financially. And, on the board, it's a pretty large number. So how much impact you have, decision to decision is you're only one vote on a fairly sizable board. But I've found in committees that there is a need for representation from counties of our size, and so I have found that to be valuable and effective.
Do you have a budget item for the travel associated with the position, the appointment, or the representation?
No, but IAC pays for travel, at least for board meetings. And so there is, the impact is not tremendous.
So why don't we do this? In the interim, Leslie has stepped up, so why don't we go with the primary, and we can always deal with an alternate later? Or if there's a situation where Leslie can't make it, we can take it up at that time?
Well, I can serve as the alternate.
Do that? Okay, super. All right.
Since
So, no, we'll make an action item next month.
that works.
Okay,
Thank you.
fair enough. All right, then. Item number 2, January 12, 2021 windstorm property damage casualty loss exemption. Bela.
Commissioners, this item came up, it's merely a discussion item, something I think the board should be aware of. We all are aware of the windstorm that occurred, significant property damage. The way this topic surfaced in my department, we had some appraisers, at least one that I'm aware of was called out by a property owner to take a look at the property. Not sure what precipitated it, but other than when the appraiser went out to the property, the owner's intention was to call him out to take a look at the property to see if there was going to be any sort of an impact on value. And the property was pretty much restored. Not quite, some more work to be done, but pretty much. And so really from the perspective of the appraiser, the property had been valued before the storm. The appraiser had not been out there to see the damage, had not been called at that time, but was called out at the end, and for all practical intents and purposes, the property was restored. No impact. However, if you look at that statute, Idaho Code 63602X, it appears to provide relief for some relief for the property owners that are experiencing hardships due to casualty loss. Okay. The discussion that ensued in my department was, okay, so what do we do? Apparently, historically, the county assessor's office, long before my time, apparently it's a long-standing practice, to my understanding, in concert with the board, or the previous board, as it relates to fire damage, casualty loss of fire. That the appraisers will go out to the property and review it and then make adjustments in the valuation. My staff brought this to my attention because they feel that this year with the significant damage, it could be a factor. There could be more than one property. It's just simply a question and a matter to make the board aware of it. My staff is not familiar, so I am informed as to what form the statute refers to, whether that form is a different form, whether there's a specific form that exists for the board or not. It's just a factor to be aware of it, and because we don't want to see this turn into a hardship for property owners, especially if there's an opportunity for relief in the statute.
Would the relief come just in those months that the property was potentially uninhabitable? 'Cause I drove around, I mean, I know there's one just north of our garden parking lot that the building was demolished. I mean, a tree fell through it, now it's gone.
So it appears, if you read this statute, it appears as though the demarcation is the date that the damage occurred, so the storm, January 12th.
Except
and
this
it's-
is for last year, so it would be the September storm, right? Because we wouldn't count any damage that happened after January 1st.
To my recollection, the storm was January 12th, 2021.
That was
But
12.
we're talking assessments prior to January 1st.
So assessments prior to January 1st, there is a lien date,
Right?
right? Effective January 1st.
Yeah.
To my understanding, this statute deals with January 1st through the fourth Monday of June.
Okay.
And so the demarcation, as I understand it in this statute, is the date of the loss, and it is the form of an exemption. So simply, it's an exemption that is for the well, I don't want to say prorated, there's a formula in here, in this statute, and it's effectively, it introduces an exemption for the remainder of the year. So in this one instance, the property owner, for all practical intents and purposes, should they get the exemption for the entire year? That's the question.
Right, but wouldn't the exemption be for 21 then, because the damage happened to 21? So we shouldn't have to be necessarily dealing with the January 13th storm. We'll deal with the September storm. I think it was like Labor Day or somewhere in September.
So I believe there's a different statute that addresses after June, after the 4th June.
Well, we can talk about that offline.
Right.
Yeah, now, have you talked with the Department of Taxation?
My understanding is earlier in this year, about the time that the storm occurred, there was a conversation. I was not party to the conversation. It did involve the tax commission.
That's what I meant.
The tax commission was aware of the process that this county has been using for the fire damage, and the comment was made that was not a statutory process, that it really should be in the form of this statute, which is an exemption. So that was just an aside. Don't know to what extent property owners are going to come forward. They could. I just think it's an issue that this county needs to be prepared with dealing with, and so my staff has questions about the form and
So we're going to be
process.
confronting this at BOE.
Well, this statute is this is before BOE. I'm sorry, this is before June, the 4th Monday in June.
Right.
So it's now. It's now through the 4th Monday of June. And then after the 4th Monday of June, it's the other statute, which is, I believe it's 60, I didn't print it out, bring it with me, it's 63-711, which that would be a cancellation of taxes. So there's, because a casualty loss can occur before or after the 4th Monday of June. And there's two different statutes that address two different ways in dealing with it.
Okay. I think my question was that when we convene for BOE, these issues are going to arise. How are we going to address them? Under which statute?
Yeah,
Or are we?
And I believe the answer to the question is the issue has already arisen. It's not waiting until BOE. So it's probably got to be something that needs to be addressed now.
Oh.
And then after June 4th, it's got to be addressed yet in a different manner for other properties that come to light after that date. So because this statute says this is a matter for the Board of Equalization, the Board of County Commissioners to address. Respectfully, it's a question for the board to consider, and so I'm bringing it forward because I know it's a question that surfaced in my department, and I think we need to have a conversation on how that's going to play out for the benefit of the citizens.
Okay. Wow, all right. So is the tax commission, I mean, I want to try to get to some bottom line here. Are they leaving it in our laps? Are they saying, you guys figure it out? That's the case, we can. Might not make
My
people
understanding is statutorily it is in our, it's in the county's lap.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If a property sustains damage, property is restored, damage is repaired, and given the bull market that we're in some cases, that could actually result in appreciation because maybe it's restored to a better condition than the one it was in. So I guess what I'm asking is, why do we make any concessions? Unless the property might have been, what, uninhabitable?
I believe that's what this hinges on. It does hinge on loss of use.
Okay. So we need to figure it out, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. We figure it out. Somehow, okay. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, nothing's easy, huh? Item number, can we move on to item number 3? So we'll have to convene, we'll have to meet somehow, Bela, and figure this out. Okay, item number 3, Idaho State Parks and Recreation, ISPR, request to resume titling and licensing of recreational equipment. Bela,
So
hope this one's easier.
I don't know that it is. And just a correction and clarification on the wording, it's not necessarily a request on my part to resume, but it's a request that I've received. So, to my understanding, last year was a misnomer for many reasons, but also not just because of COVID, but also because the state, the two state agencies, the Idaho Department of Parks and Rec and the Idaho Transportation Department, which handles the vehicle licensing, they have been both working on changes to their systems, and they had an amicable divorce because they were using, effectively prior to that, the RMS system was the same system they both used. It was transparent to us, but at the state level, there were all kinds of issues in terms of dirty data and so on and so forth. So that's what led to the parting. I've learned that the changes that were implemented by the Idaho State Departments of Rec occurred in April. They elected to pull back, if that's the correct word, on having the counties throughout the state do the registrations of the recreational equipment. Titling remained, and the counties did handle the titling of those recreational vehicles and so forth. Prior to that, so let's say 2019, the vehicle licensing divisions of the counties were handling all of that. They were handling the registrations of the recreational vehicles as well as the titling for all the Parks and Rec, but also doing the DMV work. Last year was a bit crazy because of COVID, because of the restrictions, because of the cut down, just the limitations of people in accessing the office, the changes in the systems. I have been just recently approached by the Idaho Department of Parks and Recs asking if we could now consider resuming doing the registrations. I've been told by staff that it substantially increases the traffic that the lines were pretty much around the building for people that come in for boating season and so forth. I'm concerned in light of all the changes that we've encountered. I mean, first of all, I want to make it clear that I think we need to find a way to do it. I think it's a good customer service thing. It's a public service that we need to be performing. That's one matter. The other matter is, are we capable of doing it right now, given the system changes and staffing? Yesterday, Commissioner Brooks put a question to me about answering phone calls. Historically, the offices, both Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene, they had phones ring. They had one individual in each office that answered phone calls. You can't get to all phone calls. And then when you have events like COVID and you have people moving in here in larger numbers, and you have the confluence of all of those factors, realistically, there are going to be phone calls that can't be answered. And it's been my directive to the staff to answer all calls that you can get to. I learned about 2 months ago that they were not getting, they did not have the capability of receiving voicemails. The phones were not set up for that. When I spoke with driver's licensing, Lori McAdams, she informed me that she's getting lots of calls for vehicle licensing, and she returns the calls. And so I made a change with IT. I had the phone set up so that they would receive voicemail messages, but we have to recognize that that creates a new body of work. Now you need people to respond to voicemails. You can't let people leave messages and not respond to them. So that all translates into a staffing issue. Now, on top of that, you heap on the registrations of Idaho Parks and Recreation, which we didn't have last year, and not to mention the stickers. And I guess I'm preparing the board that I'm going to have to come back for a mid-year request for personnel. I don't think we can wait until the next budget year.
Bela, can the state not pay for this since the state's doing it right now?
You mean pay for the employees?
Yes.
Yeah.
I suppose we could have that conversation. It is a question of interpreting the statute. I will say that the Idaho Parks and representative that I met with was very cordial. They're not pushing, they're asking. They're not demanding that we do it. Okay. They're willing to work with us, and if it's not, they said if it's not this year, if it's next year or January or what have you, great. But the other aspect is to look at it from the perspective of the citizen and the residents, the people who come here and we are the recreation mecca of Idaho. And we have by far and away the largest volume of recreation. Idaho Parks and Rec calls them designations. We're 2 times larger than the next largest county. Bonner County is about 10,000 designations. We're about 32. So I find it difficult to be in a position to say no to providing what used to be a government service that was provided. We need the resources to do it.
So then back to Leslie's question. If the state's being very cordial, collegial about it, ask them. Say, look, we'd like to offer the best, the most comprehensive customer service we can. Are you willing to pay? Are you willing to fund these employees? We'll take on the workload if you provide the resources.
Yeah, I will ask that question, definitely. I don't know that the plan necessarily should be contingent upon that. Because in the end, we still have citizens that have an expectation.
Well, that's true.
No, I agree that I think we should provide it like we provided it in the past. But right now, I would say let's plan for next year, whether it is January or next. But to add that right now, I think would be crazy unless they did provide you 2 or 3 bodies additional.
And I guess I would ask the board to consider, because I am planning on coming back to the board, and I will be asking for a midterm, because we need it. We absolutely need it.
But I think the question we're going to pose is, have you taken it up with the state?
I will be sure to do that. But I want to solve the problem.
I hear you.
Sure.
Never mind. Okay.
Before we move on,
Say how big a problem is it, but, I'm sorry, Ben.
just, Bailiff, for what it's worth, we have an MOU with the AG's office relating to an investigator who works in my space and primarily works for the ICAC unit. And so it's not unheard of for that kind of an arrangement to be reached, and we can certainly provide you the form if it gets to that point.
And I'm in process of working on an MOU with the ITD for that very reason, to handle and help with the registrations. In fact, I did ask the representative when he met with me of Parks and Rec. I believe, if I recall correctly, the answer was in the negative. Doesn't mean I'm not going to ask again. So I will do that. I just think it's an important public service statement that this county can and should make.
Fair enough. I don't disagree. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else on this? No?
Well, you know,
Yeah, Sheriff.
Microphone.
it just seems foreign to me that county employees do a state function. That's just seems foreign to me. It's time, if it's a state function, then state employees. If it's a county function, county employees. Just seems just seems foreign to me. That's all.
I would say I have to agree, and I can only refer to the statute as it reads. Title 67, Chapter 70, 67-7029, Agents of the Department. The assessors of the various counties of the state shall, most powerful word in law, shall be the agents of the department and shall perform such duties as prescribed by law.
And this is why IAC is very important, because they try to fix some of these broken things.
Mandated with no compensation. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Bela. Item 4, Kootenai County Policy 930 discussion. Leslie.
Yes, so I think we have a good working draft. What I want to say is this is not a new policy. This is always what our policy should have been according to statute. So the last policy was in conflict of statute. And I think that this new policy is actually going to give a little bit more flexibility with that $10,000 increase. So there's a couple things I want to point out. Under item 3, policy, the use of excess appropriated funds across A, B, or C budget categories is prohibited without the express written approval of the Board of County Commissioners. Without Dave or Darren here, I'm taking that to mean if there's excess funds in any of those categories, you have to have board approval to use those. So I think that's, I mean, it is in statute, but I want to just point that out. And then Section B is where the most change has occurred. So it gives that language, elected officials and department heads may spend up to $10,000 per transaction within a B budget line item without advance approval from the board. Expenditures in excess of $10,000 per transaction shall require express board approval unless authorized through a BOCC signed contractual agreement. I'm going to just stop there real quick because HR, for instance, has the different things, health insurance and things like that, that all those payments are over $10,000. So we've signed a contract, so those things don't need to come before us. But if somebody's asked for 3 cars, you know, then that is something that would be an over $10,000 non-contractual, previous contractual item that they would bring before the board. So well, let me finish now. So I just want to make that distinction. For instance, if somebody's building, you know, like the marine building or something, somebody wouldn't come before us for every $10,000 invoice. We know that they're building a building. So, unapproved expenditures outside of a B budget line item are prohibited without the express approval of the board. In an event of emergency, elected officials and department heads may contact their assigned board liaison for emergency spending approval. So back to that unapproved expenditures outside of a B budget line item. So in statute, it talks about the lowest delineation, and that's line items. In previous, I think the practice has been, if I have budgeted for paper plates and another line item, I have budgeted for cups, but I need more cups than paper plates this time, then I'm just gonna take money from the paper plate and put it into the cups. Okay, so that is still fine under this new policy. But what is not fine is saying, I don't really need that many plates or cups, I'm gonna buy spoons. That is what has to come before the board. Does that make sense?
It doesn't make sense, no.
I think,
It doesn't make sense at
I
all.
think what you're trying to say is what we're disallowing, or without board approval, is the change in category.
Something like that. Go ahead, Baylor.
Yeah, I would agree with that comment because I would think that spoons, plates, they're all in the same category.
Okay, so,
So if you're talking about, I'm not gonna buy plates, but I'm gonna buy printer, different.
yeah, and that's what I mean. Okay, so bad example. Okay, so you have printing costs, you have advertising costs. Okay, so you've been approved for both printing and advertising. Turns out you're gonna need more advertising and less printing. Okay, so you're still going to come within your B budget item. But if you decide that you need chairs, but chairs have not been any part of the printing or the advertising, then the chairs would have to come before the board. And,
So, because I'm a newly elected freshman here, I get to ask many questions. This policy, is this drafted from another county here in Idaho?
nope, it's strictly based off state law.
Okay, so other counties have similar policy? Because I've talked to several department heads of counties larger than ours and smaller than ours, and they have no such policy. So I haven't seen one. Is there one that we've drafted this policy?
It's originating because the policy that we had was actually in conflict with state law, the way the last policy was written.
And what county has weighed in on that, the case law, can I ask? Apparently, there was case law that said we were in conflict.
That I don't know. I've just been having a conversation.
I just see this as coming out of the clear blue sky here, and what you're gonna have is the exact opposite effect of what you desire. People are going to take the easy road, and they're just, instead of properly budgeting line by line, they're not gonna come before you, they're just gonna try to figure out a way through the system that the auditor is not gonna have to be a policeman for every warrant that we issue. We have, in the past, allowed people, and since I have been clerk, we have had one elected official that had to pay because went over budget. The previous board, which is made up of the same members as the current board, also made two other elected officials who went over budget whole. Now, also, every week, you're approving payables. It is our job to make sure they are in the budget, and we do not go over them. And according to statute, it says that I can issue no warrant. This is going to be an absolute morass. Now, we also, which most people don't know, we were the prototype for the new statewide system that's being implemented for transparency's sake by our state controller. We sat down with Brandon Wolf and established charts of accounts. This is going to be an absolute disaster, and now we're gonna get less accurate budgeting everything was properly budgeted, because nobody could foresee that. I understand the emergency discussion, but I'll use the example. Election supplies is where we took all of the information that should be and is under telephone, because we didn't have any need for telephones and electronic poll books. We didn't even own them. The other thing is, again with elections, what I think is going to happen, instead of getting a finer and leaner budget, you're going to get people that are going to ask for more money. A perfect example, thank you. A perfect example is that I have never, ever budgeted for an August election. But if I have to come forward and say, oh my goodness, a levy has failed or a school bond has failed, I need poll workers, but I wasn't planning on it. What's going to happen is I'm going to be forced to budget for an August election, even though in my tenure as clerk, we've only had two. I speak in opposition to some of these changes, and I think it would be courteous to talk to the county auditor before these things are done. Thank you.
In addition to the clerk's comments, as leaders in this community, it's your job, the commissioner's job, to make this organization more efficient. And more efficient is you push responsibility down. You don't push responsibility up. That creates bureaucracy and inefficiency. In addition, I can't find any other counties, larger or smaller, that do this. I believe if you're going to do this, then you should add a statement in subsection 3 that commissioners shall fund B budget line items as directed by each elected official then. Because what Mr. Brandon says, it's very difficult to predict the future. In budgeting of personnel, I don't know what we're going to do with public safety and control room operators. 5 of them withdrew yesterday for this pay. Our overtime budget's going to be, I'm going to come to you and say, hey, we're going to be spending a lot more money on overtime.
Okay, so that's a separate issue from this policy. So what I want to further...
Well, I oppose this policy, and I think this creates bureaucracy and inefficiency.
Okay. So what I wanted to say is, first of all, Jim, you did come to us over and over and over again for the last election to get poll books, to get all this stuff. That's all we're asking. So you've actually done all of that. So this changes nothing to the way that you've operated in the past.
I can say that. Commissioner Duncan, I can say that's how I operate. I can't, as auditor, go in and say, well, how does Sheriff Norris or how does Prosecutor McHugh operate? I don't know. All I know is I got to issue a warrant before Steve can pay it. And according to this policy, according to statute, it says that the county officers shall issue no warrant and the county commissioners shall approve no claim. I mean, it's just going to create a lot of additional work, and it, in my opinion, is going to have the opposite effect on our budget that we have worked very hard to get it more accurate for everyone.
So Jim, if somebody budgets for 1,000 chairs, and instead of 1,000 chairs, they go out and buy a car, is that okay with you?
No.
That's
certainly.
what this policy is addressing.
Priorities change over time. There's unpredicted events that occur.
Right.
So priorities do change.
Right, but then come to us and say, we don't need 1,000 chairs, we need
And
a car.
approve the B line item budgets as requested by the electeds then.
Can I weigh in here? I want to ask a question.
Yeah, go right ahead, Steve.
On the budget resolution adopted each and every year in August, What does that not provide? Is that not spending authorization for elected officials or not?
According to statute, it is not.
If I could interject, in
That's
my,
incorrect.
And according to legal, budgetary responsibility does not equate with spending authority.
in my experience, I would concur with what Commissioner Filios has said, that there's typically two separate authorities. There's the authority to actually spend, but then there's the authority to create the obligation, which is a procurement function typically. And speaking to the issues that Sheriff Norris mentioned about not creating bureaucracy, I totally agree. I think there are things that this county can do that other counties have done to delegate authority. And when the time comes to issue a procurement, because all that power is vested in the Board of County Commissioners, there is statute that says the board can delegate that authority, which is
To one person, though, not to multiple people.
that's not my reading.
I understand that, but that is the reading that I was given.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my question would be then, what makes Idaho so unique, or Kootenai County so unique? It's a best practice to delegate. The statute reads,
Go ahead.
the purchasing power of the county and the authority to contract for purchases may be delegated to another elected official or an employee of the county by the Board of County Commissioners.
Right, and so that is narrowly being interpreted as one person, not elected officials or department heads. So we can have that discussion too offline. So the only changes really going forward that we're talking about is we're allowing the $10,000 limit instead of the $5,000 limit, okay? So that is doing away with bureaucracy right there, all right? So the other thing that I'm hearing that is being disagreeable to is the fact that if you've asked for chairs, but you want to buy something else that has not been pre-approved in another line item, just come before the commissioners. I don't understand how that is different than what we have been supposed to be doing this whole time. So to me, I have department heads all the time. Hey, I've had this expenditure, it wasn't approved, I didn't know it was coming. Okay, fine, you know.
I would ask if it's all right that I ask Keith Taylor and Lori Shaw. Keith is our Deputy Finance Director and Lori is in charge of county payables. If they would weigh in, please.
Yes, thank you.
Is this? Right, so if this policy, especially with the B, goes into effect, the board's going to turn into effectively the expense police, the way it's currently written. That is not the way we budget, is down at the line item. To do it at that, the way we do it is we do it at the B classification by department. Your responsibility is to stay within your budget as allotted by your B budget. So that means, for example, in elections, when they decide, we've got to go to an all mail-in ballot, what they're doing is they're essentially saying, okay, well, we'll take from this line item and this line item in order to run an all mail-in ballot. You, in the past, have left that to the elected official department to decide. Under this policy, if I all of a sudden need postage, I've got to show up in front of the board for an expense that is
Let me weigh in here.
minuscule.
That's not the way I interpret this. Let me make it simple. If you're in the B budget, you're in the B budget. You cannot exit the B budget and reallocate the money to go purchase a capital item. That is pretty much always,
That your policy already states that.
We would never allow someone to
Okay.
go buy your 10,000 chairs in place of a vehicle. We would immediately
There you
flag
go.
that expense and
Right.
bring it to your
So,
attention.
so what Leslie is saying here is, and Sheriff, bear this in mind if you will, because it's not a concentration of power. If anything, we're increasing the delegation because what's being proposed is instead of a $5,000 limit, you got a $10,000 limit. The rest of the policy is really just being reiterated here.
No,
You don't.
no, if I have an emergency expense, I don't have to come before you as long as I spend less in my office expense in order to cover that postage. That's what managers are doing right now, and
Right.
that's the way we are policing it. Right now, your policy is saying, because I can't spend out of my office budget that you have allotted, I've got to come back to you now and ask for an emergency expense that's not
Okay.
budgeted.
So that is where the confusion is happening. So that is not what this says.
It needs rewritten.
Okay, so,
What other counties have such a similar policy in Idaho?
well, I talked to Bonner County, and
Okay.
they said that if somebody's gonna spend something that was not approved, that they need to come. So let me just reiterate this. Unapproved expenditures outside of a B budget line item are prohibited without express approval of the board. If you already have a postage line item and you already have a paper line item, turns out you need more postage than you need paper, that's on you. That's always been on you, and that's where it's, but if you're buying something that is not already in a line item, that is what we're trying to bring to the board's attention.
Well, let me ask, have you quantified that to see how much out of line item spending happens? Because I can tell you it happens all the time.
For things that weren't ever budgeted at all.
Correct. That is correct, because we, from a reporting standpoint, if we can't call printing supplies office supplies. They're two different line items. And what you're saying is, if we have an emergency printing supply, people are going to be coding that to office expense where they have budget, and we've been fighting that ever since I've been here to get people to, record stuff where they belong, even if they don't have budget for it.
Right.
Commissioners, I have a question. Could the issues of concern be addressed and an agreement be made if the proposed rewrite in section B budget, I'm reading the first line of the new text, and then I'm going to make a comment. Elected officials and department heads may spend up to $10,000 per transaction within a budget, and then remove the words line item, just within B budget. And my question is, if it was rewritten that way, would you not achieve the purpose that the board is trying to achieve and also address the issues that the clerk has raised?
So I think what legal has raised red flags about is the fact that if somebody asks for chairs and they have asked for tables, I mean, I'm not sure even how to make an example, okay? And the commissioners have said, no, we're not going to fund tables. And then the department head or elected official goes out and says, well, we didn't really need all these chairs. What we wanted was tables. So now, without board approval, we're gonna go buy tables and we're gonna take it out of the chair budget. That is what we're trying to avoid. Okay, so if it turns out that, wow, you really do need tables instead of chairs, come to us. That's all that's being asked. It's those things that were expressly not approved or things that 18 months in advance is what we're trying to do here. I understand that is a almost impossible prediction. So we're not trying to create bureaucracy. We're trying to follow the law. We're trying to say, hey, if you didn't budget for this but you need it, please come to us. Don't do without something else to buy what you now need. And definitely, don't do it on purpose.
Can I weigh in for a sec? I will speak with my manager hat on and say that having to come back to the board every time I want to buy something that was not budgeted, but I need, and I have extra money in travel or whatever, is a way more efficient process and gives me what I believe is the discretion that we should have within especially the B budget. A and C, I don't really care about that. But within B, it matters a lot. We have, I don't see, and I'm not going to contradict whatever, you keep throwing around legal, and I have never seen this. And I guess that might bear at least some explanation to all of us, because we've all, it's difficult enough without having to come back and, come to the board to say, I need this or that, even though I didn't anticipate it and it's not in a line item. It's just, it is bureaucracy. And I'm not saying that it's like you guys are in love with bureaucracy. I know that's not the case, but that's the reality. The more times I have to come back to the board to approve, especially if I need something in a moment, but I can't get it.
So Barry, do you find occasions where it was something that you just never budgeted for whatsoever?
Sure.
Can you give me an example?
Ammunition. Maybe I didn't budget. Maybe I can get it for a great deal, so I'm going to buy it in bulk. And maybe I didn't budget it at all, but I've got some extra money that I didn't spend, and so I can do that because it's an effective way to get that done. Or I have a bunch of exhibits that I need to get printed up, and I need to take them out because now I can't go to reprographics anymore. So that's a cost that last year I might have been able to avoid. This year I can't. And so I've got a trial on Tuesday, and I need 15 exhibits printed up on whatever. So I think there are many examples of those kinds of things that come up that it would be nice if we had the trust of the board to be able to do this. And I know what you're saying is it's not trust, it's legal. And yet, I look at the statute and it's not clear on its face to me that the statutes talk about anything but A, B, and C.
Okay, so I can get you that legal opinion.
Could I get a copy as well?
Yes.
I'd like to offer one example along the lines of what Barry's talking about. We had that recent event in the vehicle licensing here in Coeur d'Alene, disruption by a customer, raised security issues. We're looking into putting up some more secure barriers around so that people can't just walk around. They're dealing with cash. That was something that wasn't anticipated, wasn't budget. We have a need. It seems to make sense to do that. And so that might be an example along the lines of what Barry's talking about.
Well, and I'm wondering if the solution, I guess we could call it that you offered earlier, by removing that verbiage doesn't solve the problem. Because essentially, they're still staying within that category.
Everybody can
I
just
know what
read the legal opinion and go from there. I have been working on this for 2 months and having these same exact arguments. And so
Where was this born?
it was born because I knew that we had a $5,000 limit that people were supposed to come. And I'm reading the payables going, people are not coming to us with these $5,000 purchases over and over and over again. So I went and looked at the policy. Turns out the policy doesn't even say what it was supposed to say, the way we were operating. And as a matter of fact, it went against what
Have you, as a board member, not approved the payables?
Yes, and then we get into the thing of there are payables that you can't return. So for instance, if it is service that was provided and we go and say, well, that service was never authorized, then we can't get that service returned. We can return equipment, and we've done that, saying, hey, no, you bought this equipment without, it being approved, and it was returned.
So maybe the best thing to do, go ahead, Laura, you've been wanting to speak, I'm sorry.
We get issued a budget, and we have bigger concerns with this county than spending from one line item to another line item on a budget that's already been approved. And honestly, spending this much time on this subject is kind of embarrassing. With the problems facing this county, it's kind of embarrassing.
Right. So that's a good question. So this is why we're having a discussion. I never came in and said we're approving this today. This is why we're having a discussion to find out exactly what's going on down the line. Now, I mean, each of us has our job. I mean, if that's what the auditor's job is supposed to be, is to make sure that this expense, this invoice before you is actually budgeted, then yeah. So that's something I need to know how. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Sure. So I guess, so it sounds like you are doing that now, but then what would change in the future? Okay, so I guess then I'm still not understanding. How are you saying that it is an approved expense then? If you're not going in there to say, yes, these people have been budgeted paper. Yes. Gotcha. Okay.
And that's based on our understanding that we're still within the B budget as a total.
Right.
Okay.
Can I give an example of a line item? So in elections, we have telephones, and we really never had any telephone expense, but we have that line item there. And when we ended up getting the jetpacks, the wireless connection, we turned those on basically for 6 days and turned them off. So currently, we didn't budget that for fiscal year 20, but overall, in our election B budget, we have still plenty of money there. So if we have that line item, say telephone, say it was $250, the moment that we go over $250, correct? We would need to have approval from our liaison or the board?
Not necessarily. If you're still staying within budget item, and the reason why you're going over that line item is still because of that expense, then no. But if you're going over your telephone line item because you're buying tennis shoes, that's the issue.
Well, Leslie, we don't do that. We do watch the categories. However, the word line item in the B budget is what is the issue here.
So that then takes us back to Bayla's suggestion.
So, Commissioners, one of the places we've seen this in the BOCC office before is with travel. We typically do not budget for rental cars. We have had situations where the IAC June conference, for example, was in Idaho Falls, and that became required. We contacted Lori and said, we have zero budgeted, will this be approved? And she said, yes, as long as you continue to budget it for it in the appropriate area for rental cars. Now, we may have money in there, so she can't tell, well, the money in there, there are other things we've budgeted in that line item. She doesn't know if we've budgeted for a rental car or not. So would that be something, we may go over because, but do we need to come to the board for a $100 rental car?
The way
Yeah.
this reads, yes. But do I necessarily agree with that? No. Because you're
Lori
still
would
within
know.
the B budget.
Right.
But then again, now that goes back to, I think, the legal opinion. So
Yeah.
maybe what we need to do is share that with everyone, because if we've got a disconnect between what's practical and realistic and what we're being told legally, we got to bridge that gap.
On the emergency clause where we go to the actual liaison, where in statute or board resolution have you guys approved individual board members to approve emergency expenditures?
So we do that a little bit now. I don't know that there's a resolution, but our liaisonships are purposely set up for that reason.
By the board, but the board has the authority as a board to approve. It's not individual liaisons.
Right. Well, and so once again, so if we follow the letter of the law, black and white, it will absolutely shut down the county. It will be so bureaucratically overwhelming. So that's why I'm trying to make these, so like the $10,000 thing, okay? I feel comfortable that for that amount of money, we can delegate that much authority, okay? So we'll just start, maybe we'll just have a whole presentation on this.
I would really appreciate to see the legal opinion too as well.
Yeah, okay, so why don't we just,
As you know, I've had a
Ditto.
tendency
we
to.
can see it. Fair enough. Why don't we do that, and we'll defer the discussion for what, another month?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Wow. Thank you, Bela, by the way. Thank you, everybody. All right. Wow.
You know, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
as leaders, it is our job to make our entities more efficient and make sure that our employees, we don't put obstacles in their way to get their job done. And I'm searching why this particular policy puts those obstacles for us to do our job. And it's our job to remove those for people to get their job done. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
And point well taken, thank you. All right, item 5. Fiscal year 22 compensation planning and strategy, potential action item. I'm cited for it, but I guess I'll turn it over to Sylvia. HR. Thank you.
You need to use the mic.
Right. No.
Yeah.
No, it was.
It work?
Yeah, you're good.
All right. Because I'm a hand talker, so sorry about that. So the purpose of this presentation is to follow up our discussion that we had with elected officials in March and the direction that we received from the board to bring back another version of the matrices for the general pay plan, attorneys, chief deputies. So that's what we're going to do today. Our intent, as mentioned before, was to develop matrices for general pay plan, attorneys, chief deputies, and maintain the sworn officer matrix, as discussed. Okay. Just a quick review, the matrices that were proposed last month were a 14-step system with getting to market at 6 years, which follows our policy and what we've done in the past couple years. So the first 6 years, it's about a 4% increase per year for the employee, and then a 2.1% spread for the years 7 through 14. Now we'll get into some costs. So what you have before you and handed out in hard copy are 2 other scenarios besides the time and position we had presented last month. What we're presenting to you is placing the employee on on the matrix based on their grade and giving them a one-step increase to advance them. So so the closest step, which is going to be the second scenario I present, really doesn't progress people through the pay plans, but I know we have to have a starting point, of course. So placing the employee on a matrix with a one-step increase has a total cost of $2.476 million, or 2.5% of the total fiscal year 21 budget. Then we are providing you with COLA because the board agreed that we need to consider COLA in these discussions. Our COLA is the CPIW of 2.1%. So that scenario with the COLA takes the cost to $3.6 million, or 3.64% of your current budget. Nancy then did an analysis for us of placement on the matrix at the individual's current salary and placing them on a step. So to do that, it'll cost us about $1.7 million, or 1.78% of your budget. And then with the COLA, it was $2.46 million, or 2.48% of your budget. Okay, that's a quick review. We maintained our analysis of the elected official salaries, and in that, one of the scenarios was to put the elected officials at the market level from the 2019 study. Then we added the COLA amount. So just market salaries is $196,000. If you add the COLA to that amount, it's $222,000. Then if you only give COLA, it's $22,000. And as we know, the elected officials are way below market. Smaller counties are making more than our group of elected officials. It's important to bring in the factor of recruiting and retention. We talk about competition and compensation. As of March 2021, the state of Idaho unemployment rate was 3.2%. That's a low unemployment rate. That's good for our country. What that's happening to us is we're receiving less applications for our job openings. So we currently have 63 positions open, and we've posted 27 jobs. When I say that, we may have posted for a control room officer, while we may be trying to recruit 4 or 5 of them, okay? So the decrease in our applications for this first quarter in comparison to last year is about a 38% decline. But year over year, we're starting to see a 12% decline in applicants. And that's partly attributed to the unemployment rate. But other factors that are affecting us and other employers in our area as well is it's very competitive. Everyone's offering competitive salaries and benefits. I've seen articles where they're giving sign-on bonuses and retention bonuses. And an example I saw the other day was Thomas Hammer Coffee Shop is to get employees to come work for their facility are giving a $250 sign-on bonus to start. After 30 days, you get another $250. And then if you stay through September, like the summer season, they give you $500. So up to $1,000 to get them on and to get them to stay. We're also competing against Washington's minimum wage rate of $13.69 an hour. Our grade 2 position minimum is like $12.72 an hour. And then, of course, the cost of living, which we've all been talking about in the housing market, are impacting our ability to recruit talented applicants. Okay.
Sylvia,
Yes.
can we go back to the numbers? Because I was having a hard time reading anything up on the screen, and so those of us back here were referring to the sheet that was handed out. So a couple questions. On the closest step column, are those numbers based on bringing everybody up to their correct step? Or exactly what do those numbers mean?
So the closest step, all we looked at in that scenario is if an employee, will say, makes $50,000 and they're a grade 10, we look at the grade 10 step system and saying, okay, where do they belong? Where's that 50,000 mark? Is it at a step 2 or a step 3? So that's all we're doing, is placing them as close to their current salary on a step. Did that answer it?
So you round up?
We're going to round up. So if it's $50,600, instead of a step 2, you're going to be a step 3. We are not rounding down.
Okay. And then the next one is with a 2.1% increase for COLA, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so the one after that would be closest step for those people that went up, but is it for everybody? Is it everybody gets +1, or is it just the people who aren't on their correct step based on years of service?
Everybody gets a 1-step increase. We didn't factor in time and position in this matter. So we put you on that closest step and advanced you 1 step. That's our whole rationale behind that, is we need to progress people through our pay scale, because we have a lot of people who have been here 14 years and they're barely getting to market, which in this system would be a step 6 for the new matrices that we developed. We're not looking at people's time and position in that scenario. Our time and position scenario that we presented last month did actually look at how many years you've been in that position. And the key factor is position, not how many years you've been with the county. And then that cost was $2.9 million to $3.5 million for time and position. And that's the best way to do it in terms of trying to address the compression issues and looking at it from where people should be. But we were asked to bring back some other scenarios, so that's what we're bringing forward for the board and the electeds to look at and saying, okay, where can we go from here, and really adopt the matrices for the other plans besides sworn officers.
All right. Thank you.
All right, let's see. Last time I had presented to you the turnover rate. I think it's important to bring that back. Your turnover rate is about 9% of your budget. These are hard and soft costs, as mentioned before, but with our turnover rate, losing 131 employees in 2020 equates to, on probably the lower end, $9.1 million. And we're losing a lot of institutional knowledge. We looked at our employees and seeing what kind of exit are we going to have due to people reaching retirement age. And in the next couple years, we could have up to 84 that would be seeking retirement. So we need to start building that institutional knowledge and succession plan so that when these people leave, the ones who are remaining aren't burning out because they're doing double duty. And so this gets to the end of the presentation, and we're going to be seeking just some guidance from the board.
Okay, thank you. Wow. Any thoughts?
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, I don't like this any more than you do. I went on the record regarding this policy, and I'm going to go on the record here. You know, we've got to bite the bullet here. I don't know how we've got to this point, but we need to have talent in our workforce, in our prosecutor's office, in our sheriff's office, and every other department within Kootenai County. And, you know, we keep kicking this can down the road, and and now, you know, sometimes in some cases we're 20, 30, 40% below market. And we're not going to be able to attract that talent that we need for the future.
That's a good point.
Got to bite the bullet.
Actually,
And I have a quick comment. The board sets compensation, so
yeah.
go
And,
for it.
and we have. This is probably the first board in a long time that's taken an assertive stance on this issue. But the one thing we haven't done, and it's probably not going to happen, is the use of foregone to boost wages, because that's a recurring cost, and I don't think that's going to fly. But I'm not going to be dogmatic about it, but by and large, that's probably not a prudent way to budget. But let me backstep for a moment. Do we have any more knowledge in terms of where the legislature's at?
They're definitely working on a property tax bill.
They are.
Yep.
Can you just talk for a moment about the 8%? Is that, go ahead.
Yeah, so they're looking at an 8% top cap, except for operating, 1% foregone can be used for operating, 3% for one-time capital. But that's just, they don't even have a bill number yet. So that's just kind of what IAC has been in negotiations about.
That seems to be the, at least indication as of yesterday, I know Leslie was on that call as well, seems to be the direction is that there will be an 8% cap with that ability to use 1% of foregone for, so there's some, I guess at least acknowledgement by the legislature that use of foregone can be appropriate in certain circumstances. And
now, when we talk about the 8%, we're talking about a percentage of our taxing authority, our tax revenue, not the 100 million that's our rough budget, but it's roughly
Only
50
on the
mil.
property tax portion of it, yes. So new growth plus the 3% allowed, plus, well, actually the foregone I think is on top of the 8%. So new growth plus the 3%, that's a hard cap at 8%. So I don't know what the numbers are for this year, but Kootenai is probably looking pretty good.
For new growth?
Yeah, but they're not going to let us take 100% of the new growth.
95%.
What is it?
95% of new growth is what's on, I think, what they're discussing.
URD closures, anything?
Same thing, that's lumped into new growth at this point.
So that would be part of the 8%.
Yes.
Okay, so let's do some quick math, Sheriff, and I'll bring it back. Leslie or somebody stop me here if I go off base. If we're looking at an 8% cap, it's 8% of roughly the 50 million, which is our taxing authority. So that's $4 million. Now, realistically, we're not going to take $3.5 or $4 million and apply it to wages. We can't do that because we have other needs. So that's probably the figure that we're looking at. Is that a fair statement?
Sure.
For lack of additional knowledge, there is a new building. What do we, if the general revenue bond fails, then I don't know what the alternative is. The alternative is potentially going to be some use of foregone if we pass it, and somewhat that would blend in with some commercial financing, wouldn't it?
Okay, so we're talking two separate things. No matter what the building is going to be financed, it's just where does that money come from to pay back that loan?
Precisely.
Right, so that's what it is. A bond has its own funding source.
That is
so
correct.
It's another line item, and so that would go, if we do a certificate of participation, we need to have money to pay back that loan.
Go.
And so that is where we would have to do it by 3% or new growth or one of our current funding sources.
So roughly speaking, let's assume the worst case. Let's assume that the bond fails and we have to go to some combination of foregone and certificate commercial financing. What are we looking at in terms of a payment? Steve had worked it out, but I can't remember now.
It's about $2 million a year.
$2 million a year. Okay,
Yeah.
so divide that by 12. What are we looking at? 180,000 a month, thereabouts. So if we're looking at $2 million a year, and our total taxing authority
Is 4 million.
is 4 mil. That's going to leave 2. So if you guys say we want to max out raises, we'd have to say, fine, nothing else. I don't care. Nothing, 0, nothing, flat. Flat B and C. Scream all you want. You got 2 mil for raises. So now back to your direction. Put it back up. Again, we're looking at revenue, Bob. And realistically, what's going to happen. So here we go. So for planning purposes and for lack of additional knowledge, we're probably looking at 2 million for increases. And that's going to assume flat B and C.
Right, see,
Yeah, there you go.
we've got
Yeah, what,
New positions.
right. with
2
27
million
I'm
in
sorry.
new, 2 million in new position
2
asks.
million in new positions, so now we're back up to the 4.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I wish I could give you an answer, but unless we go through some thought process here, we don't know what we're dealing with. You know, for lack of additional knowledge, Sylvia, I mean, the second column, we're going to have to eliminate. That's just not doable, okay? Yeah, that's not going to happen. It's just not doable. Not with what we know today, okay? So it's going to have to be something between the first, third, and fourth columns. Right now, based on what we're seeing, it would be the matrix without the COLA, which is the 1.765.
So just so we're clear, again, back here, are first, third, and fourth column the same as the first, third, and fourth columns that we're looking at?
You mean in the print?
The paper is arranged. Yeah, the paper is
Yeah, thank you for, I'm sorry, I was referring to this.
Two and four on our sheet or on the screen?
Well,
Well, we can keep the first one. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah, thank you.
yep,
Yeah, eliminate the 3.6, that's
Yeah.
right off the bat. So this is what we're looking at, and you know, Sylvia, we can always back it off, but if you're looking for direction today, so, Leslie, what do you think?
well,
If,
there's just no good answer.
no, there isn't.
I mean, closest step with COLA seems to hit both, but closest step +1 moves people through, but it doesn't change the ranges. So,
What do you, of those two, what do you think? I'm sorry.
No, I was just,
I got my back.
is this working?
Give me.
I was just going to say, without adding a COLA on top of it, we're not moving the ranges, which means we don't increase the lowest end of the market, so we're not going to be getting applicants again. For the AMP administrative person, we got 3 applications. That's AMP. We're not talking,
They usually get probably 40, 50 applications for those type of positions. Administrative, we're down to 3. And he's going to have to offer a lot more than what we're showing the range at.
Yeah.
So he'll have to ask for an exception to policy.
So Nancy, what are you thinking?
I'm saying if we don't adjust with the COLA, if we don't adjust the salary ranges, that we're going to be struggling to fill positions throughout the county, not just the ones that we've struggled with historically.
So you were thinking column 4 on the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right.
It'd be number 2, it'd be column 2 on your paper.
Jen, it's the 2.463.
If we could do a placeholder in the budget, that would be great, and if that's the direction we'll get, we'll continue to fine tune our reports, because we're working, all this scenario was based on our employee levels as of February, was the report that we're working on. So we need to continue to crunch the numbers, but if we could have a placeholder of 2.5 million, that would be wonderful. And moving the scales is probably the right thing with that COLA.
I mean, for lack of additional knowledge at this point,
Fine with that.
okay, 2.5 placeholder.
I know the board is talking about another subject as it pertains to how the residents of Kootenai County conduct business and how Kootenai County conducts business and their elected official. This is going to be the number one issue facing Kootenai County as an employer. If, to me, you get rid of that other commission and let's have some real business leaders in this community make some recommendations to you on what you should be doing, would be a better use of time than what we're seeing with this other commission. This is going to be a big problem, and you're going to have big decisions to make.
It's already a big
We are.
problem.
And I think, quite frankly, I think we have the resident expertise within HR to be able to do that. I really do. And putting our own heads together, I think we can do it, Bob.
Another subject is going to be health insurance and health benefits. What are you guys looking for to maybe offset this and compensate? I think sometimes people don't see the PERSI and the insurance, the iceberg under the water, what this county offers employees too. But you guys have paid a lot of the contributions to health insurance too. So what approach will be that this year, I guess?
And right now, the number we have is about an 8% increase, but it's very early. We will not know really some good numbers till June or July.
What was our increase in the current year? Was it like 5?
Was it 4?
4, I thought it was 4.
4%,
low?
if I
Okay.
recall.
Yeah, it was low.
Yeah, and the board did take all the hit on that.
So for planning purposes, preliminarily 8?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Dorothy, did you want to say?
It's important to note that when we look at that, employees are looking at their paycheck of what they take home. And when we recruit, we've strategized, and even with Bela had discussions of putting what their benefit value is, but we don't want them to misinterpret that. Okay, your actual pay is $35,000 a year, but with your benefits it's $56,000, and they're going to think they get a check 12 months broken out of the $56,000. So we have to be very careful in how we promote that. We need to, because our benefits are great, but we also know the pool that we're recruiting from are a younger workforce, and they're just trying to make ends meet and aren't quite looking at that retirement like some of us are. So we just have to have a good balancing act.
And let's bear in mind that the turnover, the people we lose, we tend to lose to other governmental jurisdictions that have equal and in some cases even better benefits.
Yeah, and they're usually going for about a minimum of a 10% increase is what industry is showing at this point.
And Sylvia, that message, I think you can deliver that message and not have it misunderstood. I think it needs to go in there. I know other entities are doing it, and they're doing it with success.
Right, and we've been strategizing because we know that's an important thing for you. We would have legal look at the terminology. We would probably do an additional breakdown from the way Spokane Valley does it, so they know this is the health insurance, this is this item, sort of thing.
And I might have been 2 years by now, but Nancy Pluff had did a analysis, and it was between $6 and $9 an hour in benefit value.
So we will ask Dina to put a placeholder of 2.5 million for salary increases at this point.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's probably, what, 800,000 increase in health insurance?
Yeah, because we're at
Most
about 10
likely,
mil.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can bring it down,
Right.
because our numbers usually start very preliminarily high, and we're hoping it comes down.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you.
And I did submit the budget for the health insurance with that 8% increase in there in Fund 14 already.
Okay. Thank you, Sylvia. Dorothy, good job, as always. I'm sorry,
Sees the numbers,
Oh,
cruncher, and
Thank you, Nancy.
I'll call her and say, what about this?
All right, then.
Well, we do have somebody on the line for public comment.
Yeah, does anyone want to speak? Public comment?
Hi, we're ready for public comment. Hello? Anybody on the telephone? Last opportunity for public comment on the telephone? Hello?
Okay? Okay, then. So the time is now 10:35 and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.